Hey there, classic rock lovers, and welcome to Classic Reviews, where we review classic rock albums. And today we have an exciting treat for you. So get ready for an epic CD review that will hopefully leave you craving to listen to this artist. CD we will be reviewing will be this live album by English heavy metal singer Ozzy Osbourne. This live album is titled Speak of the Devil. It came out in November 1982, and some people may know this album as Talk of the Devil. This is an official live album rather than an off the soundboard bootleg release, and Ozzy Osbourne and his band did a couple small concerts at the Ritz, which is a small rock club in New York. At the time of doing this album, there was a lot of turmoil going on. Ozzy's management and record label really wanted him to do an entire live album of Black Sabbath covers so they could compete with Black Sabbath, who had Ronnie James Dio as their singer at this point, and were about to release their live album called Live Evil. However, one problem that came up was that Ozzy's band members, which at this time comprised of Tommy Aldridge on drums, Rudy Sarzo on bass, and Randy Rhoads on lead guitar, really didn't want to do this album, as they felt they'd established themselves with Ozzy's solo material, and that doing all Sabbath songs would be a step backwards. Plus, I know Randy Rhoads wasn't really a Black Sabbath fan and wanted to leave Ozzy's solo band at this point anyway. So, this album was purely made as a contractual obligation, and just to add to the turmoil, Randy Rhoads would die in a plane crash, so not only did the band have to record an album that they didn't want to do, they had to find a replacement for Randy Rhoads while grieving his loss, all at the same time. Randy Rhoads' first replacement, which was Bernie Tormé from the band Gillan, didn't work out, so they ended up with Night Ranger guitarist Brad Gillis, and the band had to rehearse these Black Sabbath songs in just a week without Ozzy. Ozzy would eventually show up for soundcheck and ended up having to perform the show reading lyrics from a notebook placed on a chair, as he couldn't remember the lyrics to most of the songs. A few things I'll say about the live performance is that Ozzy Osbourne had a bald head as he drunkenly shaved his hair off a few days prior, and the live shows were more casual than usual, with the band more dressed down rather than wearing normal stage clothes. And the usual spectacles of Ozzy Osbourne's concerts were scaled back, also the band could focus on giving the tightest performance possible for this live album. A few other things I'll mention is that bass player Rudy Sarzo was already secretly recording the Mental Health album with Quiet Riot around this time. The front cover features a smaller picture of the original album cover, and the track listing on the back is all written in a circle in rather small writing. So you have to keep turning the CD case round just so you can read what song is playing. So we're now going to go through the track list, and as this is a live album, I'm going to talk more about the live performance rather than go into detail about each song. And to save repeating myself, I'm going to gloss over the track list with brief details and then talk more about live performance after. This live album starts off strongly with the early thrash metal track Symptom of the Universe, and then you have the song Snowblind, which feature Ozzy shouting the word cocaine after each verse, and then you have the songs Black Sabbath, Fairies Wear Boots, and War Pigs. And at the halfway point of this album, you get to hear Ozzy play harmonica on track number 6, which is the song called The Wizard. Track number 7 is the song called NIB, and track number 8 is the Cannabis song called Sweet Leaf. Now, when this album first came out, Sweet Leaf was omitted from the original track listing, which I assume was for time constraints, but as you can tell here, it would be added to later re-releases of this album. Track number 9 is the later Sabbath song called Never Say Die, and the third to last song on this CD is called Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. With the song Sabbath Bloody Sabbath in mind, the producer of this album, Max Norman, said that he had the band perform an extra show with no audience, in case the actual live performances with the audience weren't that good quality. There is debate over which songs on here had real audience and which ones had the audience dubbed in, but the song Sabbath Bloody Sabbath is said to be one song that definitely came from a show with no audience. Another thing with this performance of the song Sabbath Bloody Sabbath is that Ozzy doesn't sing the outro of this song, which I assume would have been too high or too hard for him to sing. The second to last song of this CD is the Iron Man Children of the Grave medley. With this and the very last song on this CD, Sharon told the band members not to worry so much about playing such a tight performance, as the original plan was to use previous live performances of the songs Iron Man, Children of the Grave and Paranoid that featured Randy Rhoads on guitar. Unfortunately for Ozzy's band members, the Randy Rhoads recordings would be saved for future release, so when the band listened to the final mix of this album, they were a bit horrified over how sloppy their playing was, as when they played these songs, they just let loose as they didn't rehearse these songs as much, and like Sharon told them, they didn't worry about giving such a tight performance. Of course, the last song on this Ozzy Osbourne live album is the rock classic called Paranoid. Now, the definitive Ozzy Osbourne solo performance of Paranoid is off the tribute live album with Randy Rhoads. And like with the previous track of Speak of the Devil, they didn't rehearse the song Paranoid as much and just let loose. However, also like the previous track, despite the fact the band weren't focused on playing such a tight performance, they were still able to produce such a great performance. So that's the rather quick track by track done, and I'm now going to talk more about the band's performance. Despite all the turmoil beforehand and the band only having not even a week to learn these songs, they absolutely killed it. One important thing to mention is that Ozzy's vocals did have to be doubled and or re-recorded in the studio after, due to his actual live vocals being pretty bad. On the more positive side, the rest of the band played very well throughout the whole album. You get some great drum fills and double bass drum playing by Tommy Aldridge, and you get to hear some solid bass playing by Rudy Sarzo, whose bass tone you can hear very well throughout the whole album, thanks to producer Max Norman, who's done a great job mixing this album. The standout performer on this album has to be Brad Gillis, who really goes for it on every song, and yes, he loves adding those tremolo whammy bar dive bombs. Another great thing about Brad Gillis's playing on this album is his guitar tone, and I think that is due to him using two Mesa Boogie Mark IIc amps that were in a stereo configuration with a rack-mounted chorus and slight delay. Now, on a deeper note, I don't think any other top guitarist from this time period could step into Randy Rhoads' shoes in such a short period of time, in such sad circumstances, and play as well as he did. Brad certainly makes the songs his own, but at the same time pays homage and respect to Tony Iommi, who originally wrote these iconic riffs. With the whole backstory around this album, you'd think that this would sound like an absolute disaster, but it doesn't. The whole album is great, and I'd definitely recommend this album to anyone. One important thing about this album is that it would have introduced Black Sabbath's music to a different generation, as they would have only known Ozzy as a solo artist, and would be listening to more the newer bands that were big at this time, like Van Halen, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, who had released Number of the Beast in this year, and the Scorpions released the Blacker album at this time too. And I also like the fact that you get to hear these Black Sabbath classics in a slightly different way. Another great thing about this album is that you could say it represents a unique part of rock and metal history, as it's the only Ozzy Osbourne album to feature Brad Gillis in what would be his brief stint in the band. Brad Gillis would go back to the band Night Ranger and would also go on to play music for TV and video games over the years. So that's a wrap, folks. We've reached the end of our captivating CD review journey. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on our upcoming reviews, etc. Trust me, you don't want to miss them. This is Classic Reviews. Check out the two videos at the end, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.